Welcome to Civitas LA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. In these bi-weekly conversations, we hear from, learn from, and are inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Now more than ever, we aim to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across our region while elevating diverse and emerging voices in this conversation. Civitas LA is excited to offer a new installment of our Community Spotlight series, which we launched last month. In these episodes, we explore the diverse and unique communities that make up this vast region and get an inside look at the history, issues, challenges, and opportunities of the day that are driving the civic conversation of that community. Each Community Spotlight episode features diverse and dynamic community leaders offering their varied insights and perspectives on these issues and hopefully stimulate food for thought and inspire others to get involved. Today, we are excited to put the spotlight on the city of West Hollywood. West Hollywood, welcome to Civitas LA. Today we have calling into the studio Genevieve Morrill, President and CEO of the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, Councilmember John Erickson, recently elected to the City Council of West Hollywood, and longtime resident and civic activist Estevan Montemayor joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Civitas LA.
Hello.
Thank you all for calling in today. We really appreciate it. So let us start. We'd like to begin with short self-introductions. Council member, as the highest-ranking official with us today, we are honored by your presence, and so we're going to give you the honor of going first. Councilmember John Erickson.
Well, it's so good to be honored by my presence. Usually that's not what I hear when people talk. No.
This is not a council meeting, so you're going to be in good hands here.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you all and really appreciate the conversation and really excited to talk with my esteemed panelists, Jen and Estevan, and really break down why we love the city of West Hollywood so much. I was so honored to be elected in November 2020 and really excited to bring and really talk about where the city is at right now, how we're overcoming COVID. And, you know, it is Pride Month when we're recording this. And so really excited to bring some glitter and some rainbows and, you know, all that we can that makes West Hollywood special. So great to be here with you all.
Absolutely. Estevan.
It's so great to be with all of you. I've lived in West Hollywood for these glorious 10 years, a decade this summer, in fact. Been a commissioner. I'm a commissioner again on the Rent Stabilization Commission. Been involved in all sorts of things, campaigns, Pride in West Hollywood, and in our adjacent city, Los Angeles, a longtime staffer to Councilmember Rue and Antonia Vidagosa. So, you know, it's good to see Jen and John, who I've worked with and active with all these years.
Excellent. Thank you. And Genevieve, last but not least, and I'll just say for the record that I met you over a decade ago when I was fairly new-ish to Los Angeles working for the LAEDC, and you were at the Design Center. So welcome to Civitas LA. Share with us a brief introduction and how long you've been involved in community there.
Great. Thank you, Dwayne. Yeah, I came to West Hollywood in 1999, started at the Pacific Design Center when the new owner had bought it, took it on as the director of marketing, then became the vice president about 4 years later, so took on more of an operational role. And then in 2008, I decided to leave that nest and go off on my own, but I was still on a lot of the West Hollywood community boards, and that's how I ended up with the job at the Chamber. And I've been there 12 years since.
Wow.
So 2010 is when I started. So that was my journey in West Hollywood.
So normally on these community spotlights, you know, I'll give a quick few-minute overview of the history of that particular community. And especially it's great for, you know, listeners not from our region and particularly from those overseas. And I'm pleased that Civitas LA can say that we are now listened to in 23 countries. But as we kick off this segment, we really want to acknowledge the 100th anniversary of the West Hollywood Chamber. So Genevieve is our senior representative here, not by age per se, but as our longest standing representative here and 100 years of the West Hollywood Chamber. I want you to give our audience just a brief oral history of West Hollywood as you know it, recent history. And then John, you can give us you can chime in as well.
And by the way, it may be by age. I don't. Unfortunately. So anyway, the West Hollywood Chamber was established in 1921. It was the Sherman Chamber of Commerce. And then in 1922, when Sherman changed the name of the town to West Hollywood, to compete with Hollywood, the movie studios, et cetera. The West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce took on that name in 22. And then at some point, the name got changed a couple times and then got changed back to West Hollywood Chamber in the 40s. And we were responsible for the first parking meters on San Monica Boulevard, West Hollywood, building of West Hollywood Park, the first bus route through here. West Hollywood Chamber saved the area from being annexed 4 times by Los Angeles to preserve it for that 1984 cityhood incorporation. But the success of the city really, besides the chamber really preserving it and building a business community there, really comes from the city council and the establishment of the city and really taking it to an international recognized municipality.
Well, I'm really curious about that because you said, that the city was, the city of LA tried to annex it 4 times and obviously the citizens resisted that. So I'm curious, again, I've only been here 17 years, but here's a community of roughly 1.9 square miles, 36,000 residents. And how has it evolved to have such a large influence on life in LA and in Southern California? Genevieve, do you want to share some thoughts on that?
Sure, and then my colleagues can also add in. I think because West Hollywood was really founded on those principles, it was sort of this area of people to be who they wanted to be. It attracted artists and people of color as well, even though a lot of them weren't allowed in the clubs until certain people put their foot down. It was a lot of seniors. It was the Slavic Jews escaping from the war. And we had a huge Russian community. So West Hollywood became a place as a haven for people who wanted to live their lives the way that they could feel safe and to be who they were. And I think that resounded in trend setting. It resounded in becoming an international icon. It resounded in businesses wanting to build and be here. It's why we have 26% of our community hospitality with so many hotels and tourism that comes to this area. So it's been quite an amazing international icon for so many. And I think it's because it's evolved into that place where people really come. They know that we're socially left. They know that that's who they want to be. They believe in our core values, most of them that want to be here. And so they come to this this area because of that, even to open the business here. Usually they have the same like-mindedness that the rest of our community does.
Sure. And Estevan, you noted that you've now been in West Hollywood 10 years. So what makes West Hollywood so unique to you? How did you find your way to West Hollywood?
I had a friend whose parents bought a property right on San Vicente, actually. And she, while I went to college, went to UCLA, she would live here in West Hollywood, and I would visit her. And I remember during Pride and Halloween, I'd stay over, and I was like, what is this place? It was magical. Truly, I just gravitated towards it. And even at the time, I couldn't get into a club legally. Except Rage. I remember we went to Rage, because it was 18 and older. And I couldn't have been older than 20 at the time. And we would go explore the boulevard. And I just felt so safe and welcome. I'm from California, but I'm from the suburbs of San Diego. So it was just a different environment, a different culture. And it was fabulous, and it's still fabulous, and it's what keeps me here every day. I lived in that apartment actually a block away from that place I used to stay on San Vicente for 10 years until my boyfriend and I moved just below Melrose, still in West Hollywood, off of Kings Road a few months ago. So it's been 10 years, and I don't see myself moving anytime soon. Certainly not until this lease ends.
And Councilmember, how'd you find your way to West Hollywood, and what makes it so unique to you?
That's such a great question. And I love hearing the stories about how people come to West Hollywood. I mean, I knew Jen when I was a little itty bitty intern at City Hall, which is where I got my start. That's how I met Estevan later on. I came to California by way of grad school. So I lived in Claremont, California for a while. And then when I decided to get my PhD, I was moving from Claremont, somewhere over in this area, ended up in West Hollywood and started my internship program there while I was going through coursework and worked my way up the ladder. And apparently here I am. But most importantly, I'm from a little small town in Ripon, Wisconsin, right? And that's 36,733 people. I was just home, so I remember getting an updated number by the sign, right? But West Hollywood is, 36,000 people roughly, but 1.89 square miles, right? But the one thing I love about the city so much is that even though it's in the middle of one of the largest, metropolises in the country and the world and the entertainment capital, I mean, all the stuff that Jen said is just totally true. This is where you go if you want to have a party, the Vanity Fair party, the Elton John AIDS party that happens every year after the Oscars, HBO, the PDC, our nightlife, the Strip, Santa Monica Boulevard, you name it, we got it, right? But no matter how much of that elegance and all that stuff is there, it is still such a small little town. You know your neighbors. Jen and I and Estevan, we can all joke about those characters that always come to a council meeting that we all know by name. Love them to hate them to love them, right? No. But the ways in which that small town feel makes us such an important community. We're there for each other when it's times of joy, when we're celebrating things like gay marriage and other momentous occasions for the LGBTQ community or the community that we support at large. But we're also there for each other, I think, when we're all looking for that home. West Hollywood has been that safe haven for so many individuals, from Russian immigrants to our Jewish community, to the LGBTQ community as a whole, people that might have been ostracized by their community or place where they've been. And they found solace and community here, chosen communities. And we all gather in the park. We all have those amazing memories of maybe being in the bar, finding a great love or two or three, sometimes in this case in West Hollywood. But what it means to be able to look over and see your neighbor and then take solace in the community and the amazing power that is. And that's why West Hollywood is so powerful too. It's not just an elected body speaking for themselves. It's a community of activists, survivors, incredible individuals that want to see positive change for this world. And we're not afraid to put our dollars or our voices behind those common causes. That's what I love most about this city.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We love that passion and energy. Please, Jen.
Yeah, I just want to add something because Councilmember Erickson sort of triggered a thought. When we were talking to, there's people outside of West Hollywood, they always use the West Hollywood address. They like to, they want to be part of it. And we were talking to Beverly Center, who the general manager was on our board, and he said, they said they have the pinky toe in West Hollywood, like Cedars does. So they want, but they do know, they recognize that their audience doesn't come from Beverly Hills as much as it comes from West Hollywood. But they said what's interesting about it is this guy was taking and wooing these big high-end brands like Tag Heuer and some others out, and they're walking out, these big executive men out Beverly Center, and they're walking down the block. And he said, Jen, it's not that there's any boundary that shows me that we were entering West Hollywood. He said it was a feeling that we all got when we crossed that boundary. And I think that's what John's alluding to as Estevan as well, is that it's really a feeling. I mean, I grew up in an activist family, but I didn't know, for some reason I was drawn to West Hollywood. I didn't know what it was when I was at the PDC, but for some reason I realized I was born to be here. I was meant to be here because of the trajectory in my life,
Sure.
So it's interesting.
Well, Jen, earlier you talked about, and I think Councilmember talked about it as well, looking at the issues of the day and the impact COVID's had on the community. And certainly, central to the West Hollywood economy is hospitality, which you referenced, Jen, hotels, bars, clubs, restaurants, et cetera. So I'm wondering, how has the community been impacted by COVID? How's the business community been impacted?
Well, it's devastating, obviously, and it's really heartbreaking when you're on the phone with someone who's invested their life savings with their family up on Sunset Boulevard, and they tell you they have till May till they're homeless. I mean, that's really the life of a small business owner is always on the edge of being precariousness, small business owners. And so we were working even before COVID on how do you save the unique boutique ma pa pa business owner, because land in West Hollywood or on the West Side anywhere is so expensive. And so how do you sort of save that from formula retail and chains, et cetera? So when COVID hit, obviously it was devastating, but the city really jumped to pivoting as quickly as possible. ABC, alcohol beverage control, pivoted, the planning, everybody tried to help support where we could. The city got into action on out zones, which really were a savior to most of the restaurants that were able to have an outdoor capacity. And then we started weekly business sector meetings every single week, which we would get about 40 to 60 people on the phone every week. It didn't slow down, and it still hasn't. We connect them to funding, same with the city. The city and the chamber have partnered so strategically and really almost like such a well-oiled machine right now. It's almost like all these years of working together as a partner has really led us to this moment of being able to work together to really see how we can help to get to the next step to help businesses survive. The good news is that we are seeing, I wouldn't call it a net zero yet because the conviction moratorium is still on. So we are concerned about that. But there is businesses that are opening that had raised capital prior to COVID. So they're now able to open. I do feel that COVID will also lead to a very positive evolution of some of our districts, our commercial districts. So, but again, it is still very precarious for these businesses to try to survive.
Sure. And Councilmember, let's speak to COVID and its impact and how the city government has responded. Thoughts on that, please.
I mean, this is exactly why West Hollywood is so special and unique. And really, hats off, round of applause in the virtual atmosphere to Jen and the advocacy of the chamber and all of the work that they have done. I mean, our businesses are the backbone of our community. When you look at the individuals from the workers to the owners to everyone, I mean, who enter into and understand what's going on, but know that they have advocates on their side. So you look at the ways in which the city was really one of the first ones to push and ultimately pay for the out zones for these businesses to be able to stay open. That was really critical.
Okay.
You look at the ways in which the city slashed taxes, permitting fees, special event fees, even though events weren't really happening. I mean, whatever we could cut, we were doing, and really to bid licenses and all the stuff that Jen can talk about with how we could have their dues and revenues, really make sure that we're focusing on keeping them in business. I mean, and ultimately, this past budgetary cycle, the mid-year, when we looked at giving them 50% off all their business taxes and what that looks like as well. I mean, City of LA wasn't doing that, to my knowledge, but I know that the City of West Hollywood was working with our business community to really make sure that we're ensuring that the people and the workers and the owners and the people who have always made West Hollywood special and home have that place here. And that's really important to me. And also the ways in which this cafe culture, this kind of sidewalk culture, really reinventing, as Jen said, where we're going to go post-COVID, right? We're recording this just a couple of weeks before the quote unquote moratorium or lockdown ends. What does that look like when businesses are at full capacity? If you're out on the boulevard like I am on the weekends, you would say they're already at full capacity. If you were at out on Robertson this weekend, I mean, Robertson had a lot of people on it and a lot of people waiting to get in the Abbey and Pump and Soulmate, an amazing new restaurant, by the way, and other places that we have here on for the city to enjoy. And so on June 15th, what that's going to look like is going to be interesting, but ultimately how West Hollywood can model for other cities to continue to support their businesses as well as expand and be creative. That's especially what we're here to do. And I think with partnerships with the chamber and community members like Estevan and groups all around the place, we're dedicated to getting this right. And I always say, if you have an idea, come to my office and let's talk about it.
Sure. Well, certainly, we're all looking forward to June 15th, when the statewide state of emergency comes to an end. So who knows what's going to happen? And this episode is released on June 9. So, Jen, I know you and the West Hollywood Chamber have been involved in the California Coalition for Safe Reopening during COVID, and you even had an op-ed in the LA Times talked about COVID Safe Certificate for businesses. So tell us about this initiative and how does it work?
Sure. This was really a reaction to the July 1st, the second shutdown, open and closing shutdown of Governor Newsom, basically based on no evidence of businesses being the cause of the spreads. And what was really starting to be apparent in the data was that these spreads were coming from backdoor parties and indoor gatherings and bad behavior. But really the safest place was in a COVID safe business where they were following protocols. Businesses had invested in the PPE and all of the things that needed to happen. And so our reaction to that was to start the Coalition for Safe Reopening, which looked at I think it was 3 or 5 points. We had a 5-point plan, a 3-point plan. We had so many things. We constantly were trying to find solutions. And our point was really, if you're going to keep opening and closing the businesses, then you need to provide funding for that because it's extremely expensive. We had businesses spent up to $150,000 getting their businesses ready to be open, only to be open for 3 days before being shut down again. And you're talking about truckloads of product of $48,000 or $80,000 of product that they couldn't use now on a 4th of July weekend. Or whatever. The next shutdown was like right before Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, 750,000 people were let off. So the points that we were trying to make is bring us to the table, create a small business task force, look at long-term solutions like rapid testing sites, places for recovery when people can't shelter at home, look at long-term solutions for the businesses like certification programs. Now, the West Hollywood City was way ahead of this as well. They had a program called WeHo Ready that got sort of shut down at the same time the governor shut things down because they couldn't implement it. But most cities were doing this. So were industries like the hotel industry or restaurant industry. They were already creating their own COVID protocols that were so strict. So what we're saying is, if you create a certification program, you as the government don't need to create it. You just need to endorse it and endorse a program that has these 5 components. It has the fact that you would have PPE provided, adequate table spacing, ventilation programs, and all of the things that are required to be a safe, COVID safe. Have a employee training program for COVID safety, have a supervisor on hand for COVID safety, and all of those things. And then when the governor shuts down, let's say beauty salons the next time, you can say all beauty salons except those that are COVID certified. And that way it'll force the bad actors to get their act together and be COVID safe, those businesses that want to remain operating. It will give the consumers a sense of confidence walking into a business that's COVID certified. And lastly, it'll provide those businesses that have invested, that are bringing back their employees, they are being safe to remain open so that we can keep an economy that's open. Think about it though, this is the only time in our history that we have closed down an economy because of a pandemic.
Sure.
And so we really were trying to say, how can you keep the economy going, even if it's partial, instead of this whack-a-mole idea of opening and closing the economy every time there's a spike? Because I'll give you a really quick example. Super Bowl, they said, let's shut down the TVs. Well, what does that do? You're shutting down the TVs in the bars and restaurants, but you're now pushing them into Super Bowl parties in people's homes, right? So the next time, 2 weeks later, when the testing comes out and there's a super spreader and there's a spike, the bars and restaurants are going to be blamed again because they were allowed to open outdoor again, rather than the fact that you shut down television. So it's counterproductive, right? It's saying we're going to shut down TVs because we don't like the gathering and people shouting to spread, but we're going to push you into an outdoor party or a in-house party. So that's kind of what we were trying to say is, look, this isn't making sense. Let's find long-term solutions. We believe in safety. We believe in keeping our employees and our guests safe. It is to our utmost detriment if we don't. I mean, we have to do this as a business.
Sure.
But even the Abbey, which has been there for 30 years, they were perilously close as well. So you cannot think that a small business, even if it's a big small business, has that margin to be able to survive.
Sure.
And that's where we were with the coalition.
No, I appreciate that. So certainly, as we think about, mentioned, long term, what are some of the lessons that you take away from this period and how the community evolves, particularly, Councilmember, from your perspective, what are new ways of doing business on the part of government that you see happening?
Well, I think what we've seen and something that West Hollywood has always done so well is the one-on-one attention our city staff can give to our businesses. We've had, as Genevieve said, dedicated community staff that were recirculated from their specific positions because, let's say, for example, we weren't doing special events. So how can special events go help out code or go into other areas and give up that space so there's more room. But additionally, what we've seen is that boutique service where it is always hard to do business at a local level because of the bureaucracy and the government, and getting all your questions answered can be a problem and a challenge. And this is one thing I hear all the time. So how can we even create a liaison experience or a boutique experience so that way businesses in good times know who and how and where to go? In bad times, though, we need to triage and do as much as we can to help individuals. Every Friday night during the campaign and still now, I go out to I was going out before the shutdown when things got closed down, and I would talk to business owners. I would literally talk to them every Friday night. I would go to a different place to eat and say, what's going on? What are you experiencing? What do you need? And what I'm hearing is they need to be able to call someone at City Hall and get their answers met. And so what we have is we have an incredible team at City Hall right now that is really working on businesses reopening, on the out zones, on whatever they would need, so that way we could provide that. I think what we're going to see and what we're really going to need here for how governments respond to this is it's a funding issue, huge. Jen is completely right that when you close down certain areas, you're pushing them into private spaces where they're just unmasked. They're not social distancing. They're not doing all these things. So when you see the spread and everything continue, that's not because of restaurants and bars and what was going on. The data was not there to support it. That's why I was proud to stand even before I was sworn in at the Abbey, right before that Thanksgiving shutdown with everyone, because the data wasn't there. And the number one concern of all elected officials is public safety and public health. I work in public health and I was reading the data myself and I'm like, I'm sorry, I just don't know what's going on.
Sure.
However, it's great to see our numbers where they're at now, because I do think we were able to do certain things to offset maybe more horrendous results. But ultimately, at the end of the day, local governments are going to have to create those liaisons and one-on-one positions for their businesses to get that standard care and practice that they've come to expect during a pandemic when things were all on fire. And now when things get back to whatever this normal is, now, how can they continue to do that? Are things virtual? Do we need every meeting for you to come into person, or can you have the thing on the Zoom to have things recorded for the community? I think more participation is actually possible in that way.
Sure.
And yes, we all want to gather and we all want to see each other, but sometimes I don't want to see everyone, and we can just gather on Zoom and we can take care of it that way, and also save some money that way too, and how we can continue to fund and help and provide those services.
Well, I know, during COVID, there are any number of initiatives around contactless government and making government more accessible digitally. And, Estevan, you've worked, obviously in West Hollywood, but also City of Los Angeles, and you're a resident in West Hollywood. I'm curious to know how you see, what lessons you take from this period and how this particular community evolves.
I think West Hollywood is similar to what Jen and John have said. West Hollywood has the ability to do things that other municipalities don't have the ability to do. I worked in the City of Los Angeles, and I loved that time. And it's no offense to my colleagues there, but the system is just so big. The city is so big, and you are just unable to really touch people in the same way and get them the services that they need in such a timely, in a timely way. The bureaucracy is so large. West Hollywood is such that, we all know the city staff. You can just send them an email or send them give them a call and they'll fix it for you.
And I just want to say, having a healthy reserve like West Hollywood has had through, I think, and I want to give credit where credit's due, because I am a new council member, strong fiscal stewardship for many years from my predecessors, like former mayor and Councilmember John Heilman, Abby Land, all of those individuals, by really putting money in the bank for a rainy day. This occurred, after the recession. Jen could talk about that when that was going on, but ultimately, having West Hollywood be, 75-ish% renters, right? When you have an eviction moratorium and the need for rental assistance, because people are jobless, because we have a lot of individuals who live here in the service industry, who are seniors, who may be retired and cannot work. Being able to purposely have that reserve to go in and say, we're going to partner with the National Council of Jewish Women, give them $1 million+ so that way residents can apply for grants up to 4 payments, or 3 for sure, payments that they could get for their rents, towards their rents to pay off what they were doing, and then providing free legal services. And one thing that I'm pushing right now is, because of all the state laws and how we're dealing with the eviction moratorium, because this back rent now is considered consumer debt, what type of bankruptcy education are we giving people? Because individuals now can't be evicted, but they can be taken to small claims court by their landlord and be told to pay that back rent. However, as we know that that's going to be an issue if people are still getting back on their feet and everything. And the same goes to business owners, how we continue the commercial eviction moratorium when the state was really kind of diddle-daddling with that one. But how did we step in when larger entities, the county, the state, weren't doing anything, and be proactive and then change and adapt as we had to a state law? But what were we doing first and foremost? And those dollars is where we put the money and where we will always continue to put the money.
And Dwayne, I want to add to what John said. One of the first things the city did when the conviction moratorium was put on, or even before that, was to put some money into a mediation service, and they handed over to the chamber so it would have some anonymity, so it wouldn't be public record of somebody who wanted to negotiate. And the chamber hired professional mediator lawyers that serve on our panel for people to choose from, to have a free mediation service paid for by the city. But I also want to point out to Estevan's point about the budget and John's, I would be remiss if I didn't say, and I'm not biased in any means, that this reserve comes from the business community. The reason the city has the healthy budget it has and is able to pay for these amazing social services is because the city was so brilliant at how they were able, and as John said, great fiscal stewardship, but also the TOT tax dollars from the hotels pay for so much of what the cities get. And right now, those businesses are at risk still. Like John said, they're still trying to recover. The eviction moratoriums are not going to save people. We can't have a moratorium forever. And the mediation services aren't going to be much use if the moratorium isn't lifted, because people won't use them much, right? And so what we have to do is really keep that balance the city's always had of coexisting between residents and businesses, and not allowing other things to upset that apple cart of how our budget flows into social services for our city from the business community.
Sure. And to John's point about, fiscal responsibility and civic stewardship, I do want to give a shout out to the longtime city manager of West Hollywood, Paul Aravalla, who is retiring this year. So, he's been a city manager for how many years? 30, I think?
I think he's been city manager for around 80 to 90 years. I know the city's only been for around 37. No, roughly, it's roughly, I think 20. Is it 30 years?
It's 30. Yeah, it's 30 this year, I think.
Okay.
And
but kudos to him for his long position in West Hollywood and his leadership there. Just a terrific job. So clearly, this is Pride Month, so happy Pride. And, central to, a lot of people's understanding of West Hollywood is its centrality here in LA and in Southern California and nationally as a leader in LGBTQ everything, whether it's rights, whether it's socializing, the arts, etc. So how did West Hollywood, which I think has a population of about 36,000 with about 40% or so identifying as LGBTQ, how did West Hollywood become such a central player in gay life in LA and in Southern California?
Well, it's actually really interesting, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I know I am, and I like to say this, the youngest council member, so I don't know necessarily. I can't go back then. My time machine is in the shop, unfortunately. But when you look at the way in which West Hollywood, before it became an actual incorporated city, the communities and kind of history about who was running this unincorporated part of LA County, right?
Sure.
You had it in not necessarily one of the best areas. You had a lot of bars and nightlife run by some individuals who we may or may not want to associate with. But also you look at the types of communities that would be attracted to those spaces that were protected by the police in some way, shape, or form, or the mob specifically that would keep the police out of the bars at those times, because obviously being LGBTQ could come with some serious penalties, both socially and personally and professionally. And so ultimately, when we look at that time, we just have, the HIV/AIDS crisis starting, but we ultimately have social acceptance or non-acceptance. It's the height of Reagan, and conservatism. And so when we look at how individuals be attracted to these certain spaces, and ultimately what they would do to create a city like West Hollywood. It's that known location that they would join with renters and immigrants and LGBTQ individuals and the businesses there to really claim that space and make it a city. And so it's an interesting little history that is a little probably sordid and fun to talk about, but
Sure.
ultimately where it comes out of it is truly rooted in LGBTQ history as a whole. People from disproportionately different identities are attracted to certain areas because they leave their non-urban centralized locations and seek of something else.
Mhm.
And here they found themselves in what was Sherman, and now then soon became West Hollywood.
Sure. Well, I think we talked about this a little while ago. There was an article recently entitled "The Rise and Fall of Gay Urbanism in West Hollywood," and it spoke to gay urbanism as a placemaking and cultural tradition, which is defined by walkability, outdoor dining, proliferation of cafes and bars and dance clubs, et cetera. All those things that bring individuals and groups together. And certainly over time, social factors such as legalization of same-sex marriage, gay life becoming more widespread in other jurisdictions, and of course the culture becoming more mainstream. So how do you view this vis-a-vis the evolution of West Hollywood as other geographies become more important? And particularly, I think, as the younger communities also find community in places not central to quote unquote gay hubs.
The election, and I hate to utter this name of 45, really showed us that we have to rely on these spaces of community that have always been home to us no matter what. This rise of conservatism and, sheer hatred that we saw after the 2016 election reminded us of why cultural spaces or communal spaces like West Hollywood are so important. But more importantly, I remember ages ago, I interviewed and wrote about the book "There Goes the Gayborhood" with the advancement and push for popular LGBTQ equality against different municipalities, and gayborhoods becoming more centralized and homonormative or heteronormative in so many ways. How you keep that distinct flavor of a city government that everyone likes to think as queer and LGBTQ friendly is, I think, exactly by the way in which Jen mentioned earlier. The boutique businesses that are only known in West Hollywood is why we're here. There is only one rainbow district that we really look at when it comes to the gay bars. I mean, you can go to Silver Lake, you can go to downtown, but when you want to go out to and have a big old gay fiesta, it's West Hollywood, right? And you can go there, stay there, and come here. And I think when you look at the rise of gay urbanism and what that really means ultimately for the longevity of the city of West Hollywood, is that it places us almost at the forefront of gay urbanism by pushing it out to other cities. And I think that's important to own that power, that amazing history that we've done to show other places where they can create equal and sustainable policies and practices, and how people are driven to that. People want to live there. People want to do business there. People want to make sure they have communities there and families there. And how West Hollywood was at the forefront and is at the forefront of that. I mean, Abby Land, my former boss, Councilmember Abby Land, did the nation's first ever gender neutral bathroom ordinance for same-sex stall, single stall restrooms become gender neutral. In West Hollywood, we just passed the nation's first ever multi-stall gender neutral bathroom ordinance anywhere. So what does that look like? And it's 2021 and we're still doing things like this to really push what it means. I mean, Jen at the chamber has been pushing and prioritizing LGBTQ policies for businesses and all that they do. I mean, you don't have local governments or their chambers or other people looking at this. And so if we can do it here, anyone can do it. And hell, I mean, if there's a gay capital in Montana one day, I'll be the first to go there and bring them a proclamation. But that's what we want to aim for. That's what I want to aim for. And as West Hollywood goes, so goes the nation.
Yeah, I was going to just add in, I think the question was based off of the history, but also I think there's also the point that should be made about keeping West Hollywood LGBT friendly, and there's been a lot done to ensure that. That myself and my generation, there's a lot of us that are looking elsewhere to live because for several factors. One, you want to buy a home, you want more property, you want to have that sort of American dream, and West Hollywood is small in that respect. But then there's a lot of us at the same time that want to be a part of a community. And West Hollywood is very much that. You go outside, you walk your dog like I do every morning, and you see your neighbors, you see folks that have had similar experiences to you, and you don't even need to have a conversation with them to both know that you know and understand each other on a level that may not be the case in a different community. And, Jen made a really good point about how the businesses really are lifting up, the city and its finances. I think that is very much true. And I also just view it as this cycle. People choose to live here. They go to the businesses because they love the community. They love the owner of their local restaurant or bar, and they feel at home there. And those businesses help fuel the city. And it's this relationship that has been created by all of us, the residents, the businesses, the government entity, to keep it from not from evolving, but from changing, because that relationship is really special and you don't see that everywhere. And I think it speaks specifically to the LGBT community, because anytime there's a big event or anytime we need to celebrate or protest, we all gather on San Vicente and Santa Monica Boulevard, or we march down Santa Monica Boulevard like many did last summer. It's a gathering place, and it'll always be a gathering place, and the city welcomes and encourages it.
I think that's the key, and Dwayne, the reason why I was fascinated listening to John and Estevan, because I get asked this a lot and I respond, and I learned so much just now from both of them, because I've been here 22 years, but I'm not gay. And so there's a lot of cry for we're losing our gayness, or we're losing our, if a gay bar closes. And just to tell a short story, I went into a meeting during COVID with a landlord that was called, the city called this meeting. It was just a few of us. And I thought this meeting was going to be about really telling this landlord to try to work with his tenants and, help them out. And so I was pretty pissed walking into the meeting, just to be frank about it, that this landlord was not being generous to help during COVID. But what I discovered was that when I walked away from that, I thought this actually is an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to evolve our Rainbow District, or evolve the rest of our city into something greater than go-go dancer boy clubs. Now those are great, and we love that. But when we talk about losing our gayness, I don't see it that way. I see the city will always have that. And based on what John and Estevan said, is that we have to make sure we maintain it. Yes, we can't lose it. But I feel it's there. I just feel that the LGBTQ community has evolved. They've evolved, and so it's sort of like, but what Estevan and John are saying is we're still that safe haven. Even if, as Estevan said, they get a house in Silver Lake or somewhere else, or in the valley where it's cheaper, they're still going to come here for that Pride event. They're still going to come here for that rally. They're still going to come here to that cafe John talked about. But I think that our community has evolved and is much more sophisticated than what some of the draconian society might still think about the LGBTQ community. And I don't think we've lost our gayness. I think we've just evolved into being bigger in the world. So that's how I feel about it. But I also think we have a great opportunity right now. So
certainly, again, this is Pride Month, and West Hollywood has been the epicenter of Pride Month events for decades. But last year, Christopher Street West, which manages and organizes the annual Pride Parade, decided to make a change, and that was to move the annual Pride Parade from West Hollywood, and I think move it back to the city of Los Angeles, where it actually started some time ago. I'm wondering, why that decision was made, and do you have any thoughts on that, and how significant might that be? Estevan, do you want to tackle that one?
I think that was a really bad decision. I do. And I think the way it was handled was bad, because the intention was always to have a footprint outside of West Hollywood. And we did. We'd had events at Universal Studios with the Dodgers. We had times where we did things with LA Sparks and downtown. So it was really about trying to accelerate that. And I think the vision, at least that I had at the time, was we keep the parade here in West Hollywood. We have a big free community festival like we did on Santa Monica Boulevard in 2019. And we sort of expand that. And then we move this music festival that kind of got just too big, honestly, for the park. It just got way too big. Move it to somewhere like Los Angeles. Move it to an appropriate performance venue. That had been the long-term vision when I was there. But I think last summer, there were a lot of things that had occurred. And unfortunately, I think the way that it was communicated to the city that CSW would be looking elsewhere was not necessarily the best way to communicate it. And that is something that was unfortunate because West Hollywood has been such a great supporter of Pride.
Sure.
Financially, but also just welcoming all the logistical needs of it, shutting down a city, frankly, and running this massive event in this really small space, if you think about it.
Okay.
So I think if the decision could be made today, it'd probably be made a little differently. But I think it is important to remember that LA Pride started on Hollywood Boulevard. There's a historic piece to that. And I think it's okay to celebrate that. A few years ago, there was a parade or a march, I should say, I think in 2018, that started at that historic corner and then made its way into West Hollywood. So there's both a way to honor the history and also, honor the fact that West Hollywood is a safe haven to so many, and then also figure out the logistical needs, because I don't think it is fair to try to make an event for everyone in one weekend. That is impossible, Dwayne. It's impossible. There's so many requests, so many needs, so many ideas. You're never going to make anyone happy. It's also, I think, important to know that the city does not produce Pride. They haven't produced Pride. It's not like Halloween, which they bring on an event producer to sort of put it all together. It is an independent nonprofit that had the ability to sort of bring its resources together.
And I just want to add,
please, John,
Pride is always going to be in West Hollywood. Period. End of story. I wasn't on the city council when the decision was made. I think it was the wrong decision. There's new leadership on the council now. I also think it was a bad public policy decision made by personal feelings for histories and drama that makes the queer community, and I'll leave it at that, right? But here's one thing I will dedicate and promise to the listeners and to the people of West Hollywood. Pride will always be in West Hollywood, first and foremost. We have that through the amazing work that the Chamber is doing. The lights are on, people are coming, people are going to be here no matter what. I mean, if you go out on the boulevard or anywhere on a Saturday, Sunday night these days, it's Pride, no matter what. But ultimately, it's going to happen. Right? I mean, Lady Gaga kicked it off when we look at the Born This Way logo and how we had it going on there on the street. We have got a lot of more amazing stuff planned. It sucks because COVID, and we want to make sure everyone's safe and secure. Estevan was right. We were doing a big park project that's going to be done here later in the fall. So we'll have the full park back. But ultimately, I'm dedicated to ensuring that parade is here and goes down our boulevard, and people can come here and be their fabulous queer selves once again, and always will be. And additionally, whatever that festival looks like, we have some amazing work being done by my colleagues on the council and how we can continue that to move forward and bring everyone here and do all that we normally do. But most importantly, it's critical to know that this is integral to our business community. Business calendars were set by Pride, Halloween. That's literally, and then the Oscars award season type of show, right? So we need to ensure that Pride is in West Hollywood, not only because people want it, but two, we can't let, as Estevan said, a few people, and usually it's the smaller groups that like to rattle the pots and pans and cause a lot of drama, when in reality, if you were talking to the people that I talked to last year and I was making calls to voters, they were really upset Pride was quote unquote gone, and they wanted it here, and they didn't understand why people cared about a music festival. It's fun. It's a weekend. Who cares? You live in LA, for God's sake. If you don't like noise, if you don't like traffic, if you don't like I don't know, having a lot of fun with people. Well, Montana,
Go to Montana. That's what I was going to say. Go to Montana.
And I know it sounds like, and I probably shouldn't say it, like I'm being a big old jerk by saying that, but you live in West Hollywood in the middle of LA County, in the middle of, LA City right here. We're going to have some fun and we're going to be West Hollywood, but we got to do it right. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Pride looks like in 2022. And I'm looking forward to riding on a float. And if I don't get to ride on a float, we're going to figure out what that looks like, because there's going to be a float of some kind and we got to get it going for our kids.
Well, one dedicated fan of the podcast did ask me to ask this question of the council member. When is that park going to be done?
I'm willing September, into existence, because that's my birthday, and I'm going to say I had all to do with it. But we're really looking at September, late September, and fall specifically for it to be open. It is a brand new recreation center as well, so staffing and what all that looks like, and coming out of COVID and ensuring that safe, proper protocols are in place, because there's a pool, there's a basketball court. I mean, when you go into this new facility, you will understand why, yes, you waited a little longer, just a little longer, but it is stunning. And when you go up to that pool, that rooftop deck, and you see all that you can, it is $1 million view. That it's one of the best views in LA, and I can't wait for the community and everyone to enjoy it. And so we're looking at fall, but I'm personally willing in September into existence.
Well, I'm going to say that I was a few weekends ago on the rooftop of the Edition Hotel, a new hotel in West Hollywood, and I would say that was $1 million view. The drinks were about $1 million as well, but that was clearly $1 million view, but that was outstanding.
$50 million drinks. Also, don't forget our new Pendry Hotel just opened as well, with the new Wolfgang Puck restaurants. Wolfgang Puck's back on the Strip.
We are lucky that we have multi-million-dollar views at every place, Sunset or wherever you're going to go. That's what's West Hollywood so special. No matter what, you can see our beautiful landscape and city.
I appreciate that. So we're going to wind down here. And as I said, Civitas LA is really about fostering community connections, inspiring others to learn about what's going on in their communities and getting involved in their communities. So, you all are actively involved. So would you say the city of West Hollywood residents are engaged and educated and informed participants in the life of the city? And, how do others become inspired and get involved? John, you moved there. You're now in the city council. You're a young guy. So how did you find your path to leadership in that city?
Well, West Hollywood is home to 36,000 people with 500,000 opinions, as people say, as Jen and Estevan know, as we all know, but lovable individuals nevertheless. I say get involved, find the communities and the people you want to be with, and, just fight for what's right and fight for the cause and get involved. There's never nothing not to do in West Hollywood. There's always something going on, especially coming out of COVID. We all know this, working at the city. So, and the thing I always say, and the thing I said when I was sworn in, is find the people you want to change the world with and never let them go. And I have some amazing friends here that I love changing the world with, and friends listening. And so that's ultimately how you impact change and get involved in your community, no matter if you're an elected or if you're just a community member fighting for what's right.
Sure. Jen, do you want to speak to, getting involved in the community from a business perspective?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of our biggest objectives in the entire time I was here, or even the 10 years previous on the board with the chamber, was how do we connect the businesses to the residents, as opposed to business versus residents. Business oftentimes has a dirty word called commerce attached to it. There's also a lot of misunderstanding about businesses making a ton of money. Most of our businesses, they care about their employees like family. They treat them as such. They've been around for a long time. And one of the questions you asked before, and I'll talk about residents as well in this, that you talked about, Dwayne, you asked the question of what do you see of how cities can survive COVID or recover? How do they have to sort of recreate themselves? And I think part of what's going to happen, which was part of our small business initiative, which the city is trying to help look at implementing these concepts for, is we're going to be looking at retail, probably doing a lot more pop-up. John alluded to this earlier about office space. How is that going to conform now with sort of a hybrid look at telecommuting now? Most of our businesses are going to have sort of a hybrid approach to that. It is very productive to have employees telecommute as well as CEOs be in the office. So to have some of that would be good. How does retail survive? It's going to probably be product launches and pop-ups. How do we as a city start to conform, looking at land use and codes and how we build to be able to accommodate that? How do we take back alleyways and create little live work environments with bespoke little businesses that can be there to support and create in our dense community a live work environment so that we can have more people that work here that live here. So there's a lot to go on in redeveloping the city. And one of those is encouraging residents to open businesses and creating the platform for them. We're going to be creating a foundation with the Chamber of 501c3 that helps to look at minority type of minorities to open businesses, be entrepreneurs, access to careers, both LGBTQ, women, BIPOC, really having an opportunity to how to open a business. Also, there's a lot of co-op type of businesses now in the way people are looking at, in other words, you might have a big space, but it would have 400 square foot of space inside of multiple businesses. So how do you start to cluster businesses, create areas for gap businesses? There's so much on designing and developing the city, and the residents are really part of that. How do we help home businesses? If we have 1,300 registered home businesses, we probably have 3 times that many that aren't registered, right? Working out of their home. Yeah. So how do we start to encourage those home businesses to either start to use communal services like a WeWork type of center that the city might create or this chamber might help promote? So there's a lot of things that can happen right now in how we redefine and reconfigure the urban design of our city, of how we start to rebuild, and how the city right now is looking at how do we rezone. Looking at venues as an example, how do you take music venues like the Troubadour or others that can be multiple use venues now? If you can't have a concert, can you have an art gallery? Can you have a special chef dining one night? So how do we take different things and create multiple uses out of them?
No, that's excellent. That's amazing. What an amazing town, West Hollywood. You know, we always like to wrap up our conversations with a lightning round. You've all talked about how amazing this little town is, and how it's just the center of it all. Which Hal Bastion would say downtown LA is the center of it all, but that's a previous episode. But anyway, so we're going to end with a lightning round, and we're going to give all of our listeners to this amazing conversation an inside look at your West Hollywood, particularly for those who want to come into West Hollywood for Pride Month. So these are going to be quick 1-word, 2-word max answers. Favorite place to take a visitor to WeHo? John.
Voda Spa.
Estevan.
Sunset Tower.
Ooh, I love that spot. Love the tower bar there. Jen.
Oh, Sunset Marquee. As soon as Estevan said sunset, I thought that little oasis in the middle of
was there last night.
So great. Like a hidden gem, you know?
There's
a lot of hidden gems in West Hollywood.
Well, there's some amazing streets in West Hollywood. Give me your favorite street in West Hollywood, Jen.
Oh, I'd have to say San Vicente, because the Pacific Design Center.
Okay. Estevan?
Melrose, between the Triangle and San Vicente.
Councilmember.
Willoughby. It's the best way to get from one end of town to the other in under like 5 to 7 minutes. It's so quick.
Jen, give me your favorite restaurant.
Oh gosh. Well, John already mentioned Soulmates, our new ones, Bottega Louie. We got some great new restaurants that are open. Now, but I also like our old standbys.
Your favorite.
Marco's Italian restaurant. It's got the best authentic Italian food.
Estevan?
Oh God, that's so hard. I want to go with Gracias Madre just because it came top of mind.
Okay, outstanding. Councilmember.
Izakaya Tora. It's a sushi place right next to Rocco's. It's one of the best sushi places, in my opinion, in all of Los Angeles.
We've got it, since we're talking about the West Hollywood Chamber president here. Favorite retail store? Jen.
So
and this is no way an endorsement of any business over the other.
I know. How do you do this? Fred Siegel. I don't know.
Councilmember.
So one of my favorite hotels is Le Parc, and I'm getting to the answer. But Le Parc has an amazing little retail store in there that is home to an amazing eclectic little boutique version of little shops here and there, and you can always find something really specific. Yeah, it's amazing.
Nor did I.
So Le Parc has a little store. You can go in there. I love going in there and buying.
My husband was a chef there for a while, and I didn't know that. So.
Estevan, favorite retail store?
Oh my God, this is hard.
They're all so good.
Oh my God.
Just say Chi LaRue. We know you want.
Come on, Estevan. We know you shop, Estevan. So where do you shop? Come on.
Chi LaRue.
Okay, there you go. Chi LaRue on Santa Monica Boulevard. Favorite, communities are so important. Community gatherings are so important. West Hollywood has so many of them. Favorite community activity or event? Councilmember.
My favorite is always and will always be the Women's Leadership Conference that the city has always done for years that I help put on. And my favorite activity to do is read in Plummer Park.
Estevan.
My favorite event will probably be Pride. And my favorite activity is sipping wine at the wine room.
Oh, the wine. Okay, I like that. Jen?
That's a good one, Estevan. Well, I have to choose a chamber event, although John said Women Leadership Awards is always one of my faves, but Creative Business Awards for the city of West Hollywood. The chamber hosted its 38 years old or something, but we honor businesses, creative and innovative.
Well, I am really surprised that no one mentioned Halloween. It's the favorite activity, favorite event.
Well, Halloween's just kind of gathering on the street and listening to a DJ and avoiding the crowds and and trying to get into.
Me too much stress figuring out what I'm going to wear.
I leave town at 3 on Halloween.
Right. Okay. Folks, this has been a great conversation, and we really appreciate all these insider tips. But as we conclude, we always like to say Civitas LA invites our guests to have the final word. Councilmember, any final thoughts?
Really looking forward to seeing everyone out. During and after this pandemic, come out to West Hollywood, stay in our hotel, shop at our businesses, come to our parks, set up a little picnic, stay safe, stay healthy. And most importantly, thank you to my panelists for making this an amazing conversation. And thank you to you so much for highlighting our beautiful little city.
Thank you. Estevan.
Oh, thank you for this conversation. And I think no one mentioned this, but if you have a dog, which I know many people do this already, bring your dogs to our amazing dog parks in West Hollywood Park, and then a secret little dog park right off of DeLong Prairie at Hart Park, which is amazing too.
Okay. And there's always parking there. If you need to get to Sunset Tower, better to park there than pay valet. Jen, on the 100th anniversary of the West Hollywood Chamber, thank you for being with us. Give us a final thought.
Thank you. I look very good for 100 years old. A lot of work done. Thank you so much, Dwayne, for hosting us. And again, thanks to my colleagues here, fellow panelists. I think that similar to what my colleagues have said, just really welcome people to come to West Hollywood. Hart Dog Park is being renovated, by the way. It's going to look fabulous. But really, I think support your local businesses, really support your local government, and support your chambers. Chambers are not, some people think they're part of the city. They're not. We're partners with the city, and we work really well together. And a lot of people don't understand. It's like John, they get a lot of complaints. Estevan got a lot of complaints for Pride. We understand. But when you're in those shoes and you understand what it takes to run a government or run a chamber or run a Pride event, or it's very different in those shoes. So I just want to say, support your local government, support your chamber, support all of your local nonprofits, and let's party for Pride.
Thank you, Jen. Well, this has been a great conversation. We've got 3 of you calling in from 3 different locations, and so this has worked out tremendously well. So thank you all for being with us today. Thank you for joining us, and to our audience, thank you, as always, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you join us in 2 weeks for another great civic conversation. And as we say on Civitas LA, until we meet again, stay strong, get involved, and for this group, happy Pride. To learn more about Civitas LA and share feedback on this program, or if you have a recommendation about future programs, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com. And we invite you to connect with us on Facebook at Civitas LA, Instagram at Civitas_LA, and on Twitter at Civitas_LA.